So hi everybody, I'm Mark Hypolite. I'm a developer, full stack developer at here at CodeStack, and I've been part of a lot of these meetups. So if you're back in return, so you're probably kind of familiar with who I am. Today I will be covering something, a very simple view into Fetch API, which is a JavaScript library that allows you to use API resources and do HTTP calls to get data or run functions from other APIs. JS Fetch is an API in itself, too. So that's kind of interesting. So let me go to the next screen. There we go. All right. So what I'm not going to be covering today, like I said, it's going to be basic. So except for the fact that I won't be covering any web development basics as far as like beginning JavaScript or beginning HTML or beginning CSS. So unfortunately, that's something that will be. I mean, I won't stray away from questions if something comes up, but it won't be covered as part of the lesson. So I won't be like, okay, this is XYZ in JavaScript, or this is how you do XYZ in HTML, with the exception of JavaScript Fetch. I will not be covering how to create an API. I will show some API code and the interaction with the JavaScript code after Fetch has made the call to the API, but I won't go into detail. So I wouldn't get too hung up on what the code looks like. Just kind of the interaction is what I would be trying to demonstrate later. I won't be giving a deep history on Fetch. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to be telling you guys who created it, how long it's been around, what's the last update. That's going to be something for you to research if you're more interested and you want to get a little deeper into it. I won't be covering what is called XHR requests, which are very similar to Fetch, another way of contacting outside resources. But that's a little more complicated, so I wanted to stray away from any of that. I will not also be covering any super advanced functionality of Fetch. It's just going to be very basic Cred operations. And if you're not familiar with what Cred is, it's create, read, update, and delete. Just those 4 functions and how to do it. So I'm trying to stray this to like a more of a beginner intro into how to use an API. So if you're just starting out with this web development, that you can add some more functionality to your project in a very easy way. Let's go on. So what I will be covering today. So basic description of what JavaScript Fetch is, basic definition of what an API is, basics on request and response, which is a very key idea within not only web development, but in JavaScript Fetch. Basic CRUD operations, as I said before, just to that is not, oops, don't look at the dog. That's actually supposed to say, it says patch, but it's supposed to be post, unfortunately. Get, put, post, and delete. I will change that for when I publish this. And then provide some online resources so that you guys can dig in when you're done. On to the next one. So what is JS Fetch API? So the definition is, what it provides is JS Fetch API provides an interface for fetching resources, including cross networks. So not only resources that may reside within your own network, but you could go across other networks that are third-party APIs that somebody else hosts. And when I describe what APIs are, that will make a little more sense. So in layman's terms, it's a set of JavaScript functions that allow you to communicate with the other site to run more functions and maybe get data, maybe update something, maybe kick off some kind of process. Much like this dog's doing, it goes out, gets the stick, and brings it back to you. Cute dog, actually. And then it allows you to create, read, delete data from third-party APIs. So third-party being an API that maybe you didn't create. It could also be a first-party API as well. One moment. All right, let's go to next. Okay, what is a API? So API is Application Program Interface, and that may not really describe quite what it is to everybody, but it's a set of functions or procedures that allowing the creation of applications that access the feature or data of an operating system, application, or other service. So still, that's a little convoluted, but really what it is just a set of code that resides on some server somewhere that has access points to that code that your JavaScript will make calls to or make contact with to those entry points and get data or have it run a function for you. And all that code, that API could be coded in any language. It could be coded in Python, not Python. It could be coded in Node.js. It could be coded in C#. It could be coded in Java. But it has a set of defined functions that when you hit that entry point, it will run that code and produce some kind of result. So as I said here, so code that can be contacted by other code to do things, essentially. So to give one example, and that's why I have this picture of the baseball pitcher here, is that there could be an API out there, and I'm sure there is. I think there's a sports API, to be exact, that allows you to call an entry point or an endpoint and get the last year's baseball statistics for a particular team, like maybe the A's. You're an A's fan, you want to know all their statistics for last year. So there will be an entry point where you can use JS Fetch to contact that API and say, hey, get me that information about last year's A's statistics, and it will return that to you through your web browser and over the network. Excuse me. Okay, so here's a little diagram for you guys to kind of see how the flow actually works. It's quite simplified, but this is generally what's happening. So there's two things that are really key when dealing with APIs and dealing with using Fetch, is that you need a request and a response. Simple enough, it is as it sounds. So a request is your code, your JavaScript code, your client application saying, hey, I want something from you, the API, or from some API. And here's what I need. And here's some information, metadata about that, what I need. And the response is exactly what it sounds like, is the API, say be it the baseball API, will return a message or a set of data that says, okay, here's your data. This is how it worked out for me getting your data, and this is a little bit information about the data I returned to you. And so it's essentially a communication. Request is just asking for certain data or function to be ran, and response is just what's the result of that's being sent back from the API. So we have our website, which would be our JavaScript. It would contact a JS Fetch API that's part of JavaScript library and say, hey, put together, it says JS Fetch, please request some data for me. So it would put together a request, what's called a request document, put it together, send it out over the internet if it's a third-party API, or if it's local, it could be over your network, and say, hey, please send the data. And that's asking the baseball API, hey, please send it back. And then the baseball API will say, do some calculations or run the code that particularly gets that data, and might say, okay, I have the data, I'm sending it back, and then send it back through. JS Fetch says, okay, I got some data, data's coming back, and put together, and then that delivers it to your front-end application. Okay, so when I mentioned before, I mentioned that there's a request document, and there's actually a request response document too. And there's a basic structure to these requests and response that allows the data to be, or allows the calls to be translated by either the API or translated by your personal client application. So for the request, we have what is, we have the big ones. This list is kind of shortened up because there's a lot of like other parts of the structure of a request that are important, but aren't utilized all the time and may not be needed. It may not be needed for a beginner use of it. And actually, I only use these in this demonstration. But for the request, we have the method, which is what type of request are we sending to. It tells the API server what type of request you're sending over, be it a get, which is like getting data, or a post, or a delete, or a patch, or some kind of, it gives it some type of request that's being sent over. Headers, as it says here, lets a client and server pass additional information with an HTTP request or response. You can add headers that contain objects or data that describe, excuse me, describe your request and help aid the request. Excuse me. And then the body. And the body essentially is the data that you would be, if you're sending over data to your API through this request, then the body is where the data could be. So be it a file, be it, there's a couple things here. This is because this is a definition from online, but like a blob, form data, parameters. It could just be a standard JSON object, if you guys are familiar with that. It could be any kind of like object-oriented object. So it's just the data that's being passed in. And so for the response, the key ones that we're going to be seeing today are the URL of the response. So after you contact it, it'll come back with the response and have the URL that was contacted. So because again, it's just the API is just a application that is being housed on a different server somewhere. And so it has its own way. It has a web address essentially. So it has an address that it can be contacted at. So it returns that with the response. So you can confirm that, okay, I can contact the correct API and the correct entry or endpoint. Response also has headers, which is that metadata that helps describe the response that is being sent back and information about the response that is sent back. Excuse me. The key thing here is status. So status is always returned in a form of a code. These are standardized codes based on HTTP protocol, and there's a list of them, and I'll be going over this a little bit more next about these status codes and what they mean. But they're returned in usually a 3-digit code that represents a certain status or message. And then status text is just something that's being sent back that describes, what's going on with your request. Sometimes that could be even blank if the API decides that they don't want to send any kind of text back. And then again, this also has a body. So if you're requesting data with like a GET or even any of your other types of requests that it could be sent, could return data back as well. As it says here, it could return objects, arrays, arrays that are typically JSON in format, primitives like strings, numbers, booleans, integers, or even as complex as files. Okay, so the methods or the tools that allow us to to contact our API or send our request to our API are these methods. So these describe and tell the request what type, tell the API what type of request is coming in. The first one probably the a widely used one is is Git. So it's as simple as it sounds. If you send a Git request, you're expecting to receive data back from the API itself, or it's a read function to get data from somewhere. Post is the next one that I'm going to cover. Post is a little less intuitive, but essentially what a post is just a creation of data. And so to understand post as what a post request would do, just think of when you're writing on Twitter or making a comment on some type of post. You think, okay, we use that verbiage as post because that's what it's doing. It's probably sending a post request to the API and posting that data to comment back or post, what you want other people to see. So a put also, actually, and back to post. Post can do other things other than just create. It can also do some get data. It can run just functions that don't return data. Post is very versatile, but its main thing is to describe that you're doing some kind of data creation. So put is kind of the counterpart to post, but put's a little more specific to, you use puts to update data that might already exist, update specific data somewhere. So an example of that would be, say I have an event. Say we have an event API, and that event needs to be updated, and you have the ID, and say it's event 1. So you would send a put request with this as the method to with event 1, and it will update only event 1. So it's strict to make sure it updates only the ID that's passed with it. But again, it also can be used to do creation, but it's generally meant for updating. And then delete is as it sounds. So the method for delete allows you to tells the API that, hey, I want to delete XYZ, that event that I just updated, we don't need it anymore. It's not happening. So we send a delete request. Most APIs, it's a little safer. For data retention, sometimes we don't actually fully delete on the API side, but you still can send it over as a delete request. And I will be covering how these look in code as well. So let's go next. Okay, so back to statuses. So there's 3 big statuses that I kind of want to point out here, and then but there's a bunch of other statuses out there, and I'm going to be providing the link of the list of statuses that could be coming back, coming over from your response. But the main one is 200. So a 200 status means all is good, all is well. The API accepted the request. It ran the function as intended, and it has your data for you if it's a data request, if you're requesting data. 404 is another one that might be very familiar to anybody really, because that's a not sound. So when you go to a page, you're actually making a request, and you can get a 404 back that just says that the resource you're looking for isn't existing. So the request can't even.
Mark, can I interrupt you for a second? Your mic's starting to glitch out.
Is it getting staticky?
Yeah, it's getting all robotic.
Okay, so let's let me drop and rejoin.
Sure.
It's a Zoom thing, I think. Okay, I'm gonna drop.
Y'all should look up the Mother of All talks sometime. It's a computer science talk from the 1950s. It'll really demonstrate for y'all just how far behind where we could have been when it comes to video and audio streaming. In fact, I think I'll look up the video and I'll post a link for y'all. This is somebody in the 1950s who had perfect video streaming, real time, basically. How's everyone? Is everyone following along with the talk so far? Are there any questions that anyone has while we're at a bit of a pause? I will point out that if anyone's trying to ask a question right now, that they're muted. Mother of all demos, I apologize. Not mother of all talks. December 9th, 1968.
What is that exact?
The mother of all demos, have you heard of it?
No, I have not.
So back in 1968, a person by the name of Douglas Engelbart, very influential computer scientist, gave a demo that introduced the computer mouse, video conferencing, teleconferencing, hypertext, word processing, hypermedia, object addressing, and dynamic file linking, bootstrapping, as well as a collaborative real-time editor.
Oh, wow.
In 1968.
So, that's, you know, so guys, if you don't know, Zach is like our local like historian. No, I don't know. I don't know what to call you. You're like a human Google.
I'm a really poor encyclopedia.
Encyclopedia. There you go. That's the word I was looking for. Well, that's interesting to hear. What made that come up? Because I was gone when this conversation was.
Oh, that was because your voice went all robotic and stuff, and so I took that opportunity to lament the current state of technology, as I typically do.
Lament.
Yeah.
Good word.
A lot of people don't realize how much further along we could have been if things just broke a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think that's there's probably points in history when that happens a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I think humans are in generally resistant to change. So that if we were all accepting the change, then things would probably go a lot faster, but there's always some kind of roadblock and difficulty here.
More cynically, I would say humans are resistant to quality, but I'm not sure that's entirely true.
Yeah, that's true.
That's just a little joke.
Yeah. Thanks, Zach. All right, guys. So statuses. I'll start from the top. So 200 is a really common one. So you're going to see this pretty much almost every request if it's successful. So it's just that everything's okay. Like I said, 404 is one that we all see if a page doesn't load. You might see a 404 error because that's a not found response. But this also can happen with API fetch requests because, again, like I said, an API is just essentially a site with no view element. So it's just a site that runs functionality. So you can still have a site, that API not being found if the address is incorrect that you're requesting. And then 500 is another big one, is that it's an internal server error. So so if the API or any of the resource that you're requesting has issue while it's running its code, so say like it runs into like a null pointer issue, or it just isn't built right, or there's some kind of bug that wasn't discovered, you're gonna get a 500 internal server error sent back to your client and to your web application, and it may or may not have some kind of message with it that says, okay, this is what happened. But if it's third party, most of the time they don't send anything back because they don't want you to know what's happening in their API because you don't own it. So these are some of the big ones. There's some other ones, but these are the ones that I wanted to point out for this particular demonstration, just so we keep it simple and understandable. But I do want to point out that they're in sets. So all these different statuses are in sets. So, and you can look this up in a link that I have at the end for you guys. But it goes from 1 to 5, and each is 100. So there's 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And within each of these, they have a common theme. So for like the 100 requests, so 101, 102, 103, so on and so forth, they're going to be informational statuses. And these are all HTTP protocol. So this is all known and widely known in web development. So this is just a very general thing that all web developers are going to know because it's something that is a standard protocol for HTTP. So 200s, like 202 or 203 or 200 OK is successful, as 200 denotes up here. The 300s are redirect. So it might return a 300 and then redirect you to a different location. The 400s are an error on your side, so a client error. So if you get a 400, like a 404, that means you weren't able to even contact the API or third-party resource. So your code throws an error, and it may show up as a 400, some kind of 400 error, because that's a client error. A 500 is the opposite. So that's if you do contact the API, like this 500 internal server error, it's a server error. So there's other 500s. It could be a 505 and a 50. I don't know. There's a bunch of different ones, and I'll allow you guys to use that link to kind of go over this a little more in detail. But the ones that you have to be concerned with right now are these 3 up top. But there are a bunch of different other status codes that some I have never seen in my lifetime. So I don't know how to create them or have them happen to me. So I don't know if they even use them. Anybody uses them. So I'm sure somebody does though. All right. So next up. All right. So keep calm. It's demo time.
If I can jump in for a second.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Just a little point I wanted to tack on to what you're saying is the important takeaway I would say is not so much that you need to memorize all those codes. I'd say generally you would need to know about 200, 500, 404, and 400. Those are the most common ones.
Oh yeah, 400 is a good one too.
Yeah, but the important one, the important thing to understand is that HTTP status codes are very, very expressive. In fact, there's even a status code called, I think it's 419, I'm a teapot.
Oh, really? Actually,
yeah.
I didn't know that. I haven't studied. I mean, obviously, it's a lot of things to remember. I'm going to have to look at that.
Yeah, which is actually in use in production by IoT teapots, which is fun. But yeah, that's my little point is that if you're thinking like, oh, those 4 common ones aren't really saying what I want to say, then you can look up those codes. And generally speaking, I would say you could find something that fits what you're trying to do a bit more specifically. That's all. Yeah,
and to comment to what Zach's saying is so once you guys do get, if you're not into API development yet, or but you intend on, you can in your API you can choose what status codes to send back to the users if they run into an error on your API code. So what he's referring to is that if you within all these status codes, if they don't fit what you want to return to the user, you can always pick one that does, because there's just a lot of different status codes out there. Thanks, Zach, for that information. That's cool. I'm a little teapot. And actually, I'll go to the next slide. These are the links. This will be in the slides, so you guys can get to it. But I provided a couple links. Rapid API is a collection of free APIs to use. So there's a bunch of them. There's weather, a sports one. I mean, there's tons. So you can go here, make an account. I think you use your Google, your Facebook, login, or I think there's a couple, GitHub. I think that you can use your GitHub login. It'll allow you to get access to a lot of different free APIs for practice, or I haven't looked at all of them. If they're written well enough, you can even use them in minor production apps. Minor, I wouldn't say like, I don't know, I wouldn't trust anything too free in in a major production app, but
there's no such thing as minor production apps. There's production, and then there's everything else. That's my opinion.
Yeah, Well, yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. I mean, like large scale. I mean, that's a better.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure.
So, and here's a list of or actually what this list is. Let's see if I can pick it up. I'm going to open it up for you guys. It's not going to let me. Anyways, and then documentation on Fetch API, request and response. So you can look at a little more detail about that, because what I cover is just the top of the iceberg. There's a lot more information that can be learned about request and response. There could be a whole class done on requests alone. So there is a lot to learn, but I'm just giving you kind of bare bones to see how we can get it working in our apps. And then I shared this because I find it important, because the put versus post can be confusing, because they both can create and update and when to use it. So that's an article I wanted to share there. And this is another article from W3.org that has detail on, I think one of them is the HTTP statuses, and the other one's a little bit about requests and responses too. So, okay. So let me close this, stop this. And I didn't stop. Now my screen's back. Close that. Yeah, okay, I think we're good now. I had a glitch for a second there. So my sample app is very simple. All we have are 4 buttons that will send requests out to an API that I have designed, and I'll show the code for that. This is the API. It's just a set of code that's written in C# to receive requests and send back responses. Let's make that smaller. And I will be contacting and displaying the data here, and also showing what the code looks like and some of the information that is returned, so you can see kind of details on requests. I want to get too bogged down on this part. If I show it to you, just kind of see what it looks like, try to develop a familiarity, but know that you can come here. This is a developer tool, by the way. I think in a future lesson, I'm going to give a little more detail on developer tool, because I find it's useful. And there's a developer tool in Chrome and Firefox and Edge with slightly different functionality to some, but most of them are similar functionalities. So I won't get into that at the moment. Okay, so the first one we want to look at is a get. A get simply just gets data. So let me go over to my code here. So here's my HTML that shows what we just saw. Very simple HTML, just one page, has a couple buttons. So, and I do bring in the Bootstrap CDN because I wanted to make sure it looked at least somewhat clean. And I do have a style sheet, but I'm not going to dive into either of those right now, because Bootstrap was last week and CSS was a different week. I don't remember. Okay, so here's my script. Oh, it's empty. Okay. So I want to develop a function for that button. So I have a button here. Where's my button? There's my button, send request. And this is for getting data and get from API. So, excuse me. So I'm going to just make a function get API. And the beauty of, actually I want to bring this up, the beauty of Fetch, JS Fetch, is that it's part of JavaScript already. You don't have to do I didn't have to install any libraries. I didn't have to do anything special to get this functionality. It's already there for you to use in ES6. So I'm just going to simply put a console log. Oops. And I'm just going to say getting user data. So this API get call is going to call the server, my API server, and it's just going to get us a list of users. This is a test API, so I'm not going to expose any special credentials that would compromise anything. And when you get a list of users, it's going to be a little more complex than I'm showing you here because there's security involved in it. But for this one, I simplified it. We're just going to get a list of users. So I'm going to create a request. Oops. Actually, create a constant that's called request. And then I'm going to create an object, and this is going to be the object that sets up what type of request we're doing. And so when we went over how the structure of requests, this is where we set up our structure. So it doesn't have to be called a request document. It could just be simply called request if you want to. And I can do it like that. And then I want this to be, here's that word method. And so this is what type of request am I going to send. And obviously, since this is a get, we're going to go get. I don't need that. OK, so I could add like headers, blah, XYZ. But for this one, all we really want to get, we don't need to describe. We just take basic headers and get the data for this particular call. And the reason I'm doing this and not making it too convoluted is because this will allow anybody starting out. You can see that there's not a lot of code to be able to use the API. There may be some requirements for particularly third-party API, but they have documentation when you start using it to help aid what type of properties need to be, what type of structure your requests need to be in. So just to speed it up, I actually have, I'm just going to take this and put it in here. So here's my request, and that's what I'm going to do. And then I also want to pass in my request. OK, so fetch is pretty simple, easy to remember. You just call fetch, and it takes a parameter. Let me highlight it. OK, if you see there. Takes a parameter input request info. And OK, this is TypeScript. But essentially, it takes 2 parameters for this get. So it takes the address that I'm trying to get to. So like I said, an API is just just like any other web address or any other website it just doesn't have a view component. So it has a web address. I could put this into a browser and navigate straight to it as well. So you put your web address and your request describing what you want to do when you request data from there. So this then is a function that says after the request is done, then let's do something. And if you're familiar with ES6 arrow syntax, this is just saying, OK, we're making a function. We're taking this variable that's being returned after the request and running some code with it. So like I have response. I console log the response because I want to show you guys what that looks like. I take the response and run a JSON function on it. What this does is it creates a promise that allows me to get the data. That's one thing I didn't cover in the slides, partially because I missed out on putting in the slides. But to explain what a promise is essentially, think of it intuitively. So a promise is essentially a promise to wait, do something after something else is done, essentially. So so after this request, like this then is a promise. So after this request is done, we promise to run this code. After this JSON is done, we promise to run this code underneath here. So it returns, so JSON returns a promise that then allows us to run that promise. And then again, do an arrow function is our data that's being returned. And so I console log the data, and I display the data on the front end. So that was 20 lines of code, and if we take out the 4 that are just brackets, that's 16 lines of code, and you're already interacting with a API for a Git. So I'll save that, and let's see what happens. Let me refresh. It's probably cached. So one thing I do want to point out here is I'm on this developer tool on a network tab, and this will show kind of the traffic that happens. Let's see if my API is started. Okay, so I'm going to send this request. Something did happen. Wait. Might have named it wrong. So let's try that again. Oh, I have an error. So let's see what this, whoa. Something is wrong in the code. All right. So let's put this here real quick. And let's try to run it again. Do I have an extra? Oh, I see what happened. No? Hey, Zach, do you see what's going on here?
Which part?
For some reason, it's not taking.
It's your script.js. It looks like it's improperly encoded. Maybe that's just how developer tools is doing it. How's it? Oh yeah, it's UTF-8. Do Shift-Alt-F. Let's format.
F?
Yeah. So save that and try that. Maybe that'll.
I had this running earlier, so I'm not sure. There we go. All right, something was, I don't know what it changed, but something was missing.
I think it was just formatting, because it looked like you had invalid characters in there somehow. I'm not sure how those got in there.
Yeah, maybe because I had it copied over somewhere. Anyways, okay, so back to what we were doing. So I sent a get request now. Before I go on with what is doing the API, let's look at this network tab and see, okay, we have our request right here. That's a pretty good. Oh, it's gonna, wait, hold on, let's finish it out. So essentially it hits my API here. So this is just an endpoint, just a function that allows us to run some code, and then it does some code and then returns some data. I'm not gonna get into what it does, but let's just continue on with that. And see, we get our data back from the API, and it's a database of names. So if I go over back here, I can show you my little database I have here. We have three users right there, and it got the 3 users data, and that's simple get request. So any questions? Oh wait, and then let's look at the request response and the headers. So we can see that we have the URL that it contacts. So it contacts this localhost URL that I have with an address of API/users. So I'm getting users. The method is get, it returns a status code. So you see the status code here that says that it was okay, it was successful. And I said earlier that there are other things that are part of the structure of request and response. As you can see here, you have access control origins, you have content type, and all these other things. Don't get hung up on this quite yet. I mean, it's important, and it will be important in your career, but as starting out, the things is this information right here. This also content type can be important because you want to know that it's a certain type of data is coming back, which is application JSON. Excuse me. And then if I look at preview, this preview tab will show me what the preview of the data looks like. Okay. So I'm just going to stop here and put out if there's any questions. Okay, so let's go back to here. Oh, actually, let's go back here. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is show you guys a put. So what I'm going to do is this put is going to go ahead and update one of these users. I think I'm going to pick user ID 102. Oh, wow, okay. User ID 102 to update. So let's take that user ID, or I could take it from here too if I wanted to. And update user ID 102. Let me say function. Oh no, it's put. So these function names can be anything. They don't have to be get API or put API. They could be get new or get all users or update user XYZ parameter. So I say console log. Oh, actually, I do want to show that. So I console logged some information here, which I'm not sure. It's something with the character set. Zach, you see these weird A's in here? So I console logged the response, and you can see that we have our response set up in a certain way. So we have headers, redirect status, and other information, and you can also see the data that we get back. Okay, speed this up. I'm going to put API. So I already have this written, so let's put this in here. Let's format, see what happens. So we fix that. Okay, so I have getting local, updating local user. And so I create some data that I want to update. So a user, users we have a certain data structure. So department, email, first name, ID, last name, phone, role, title. I'm going to send in the data that I want to update with this put request. So a put request takes body or data in the body because it needs data to know what to put in the update, the object that you're updating to. So I create this data, create a request document. I make method put, simple enough. So instead of get, we have put. The only change, another change here would be that I have to state a content, or I state a content type of application JSON. So saying that I'm sending JSON data over. And then in the body, so that's where I pass my data. That's what I said earlier in the presentation, the PowerPoint, is that the body is where you pass data in or receive data. So in the body, I'm turning my data into stringified JSON, a JSON string array, and then passing it in my request document. And so it becomes the same kind of pattern that was before. We have a fetch, so that's our fetch.js API. And then we have our location, which right now this says 1. So I want to go out to get the correct ID. So and normally this would be dynamic. So I'm just going to say 102 is my ID. So if you see that right there. And I want to update 102. So that's my web address. This is just a query param right here, 102 that the API is going to read. And then again, passing my request doc. Most of this code right here is the same as before. It gets a response. It logs that response. It turns the response into a JSON promise. The promise is then read and runs code to display. So we have display there. So I'm going to save that. See if this one's a little more successful than the first one. So I'll empty that. So let's see what so let's get our users. Our users look like that right now. So if this is successful, one of our users should have first name, spider name, last name, Van. So let's send our put through. And you see our put actually hit our API, and it goes to a different function. So we have this function here that is update user versus the first function I had, which was get user up here. So this is just another address. It's a route. I'm not going to get into the details of that. And so it runs this code to do the updating. And you can see that it passed our parameter in for 102 or 1002, and also passed in the data that I want it to send, which has the weird characters as well. Something's going on with my computer right now. So let's, hopefully it doesn't. And then the response, it tells me just sends back what I updated, what data I sent in. That's all it's programmed to do right now. And you can see that we get our response header back, or a response data back in structure, and we get the response back too. And if we go over the network tab, we can see it makes another call right here to a different web address. So requested URL, just like anything else. And actually to prove this, that this is just a web address, I could go up here, put it in here, and hit, oh, nope, that didn't work. There might be some safety protocols in place that are causing that to happen, but normally you could just put it in there and it would go over. And then
or one is unauthorized, so you might not have put a
did it give?
Which one? You like allow anonymous or something like that? Yeah.
I have another one that I use to just check a status real quick, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so let's get our users again and see what they look like. See if the data did update. I'm going to take this out so we don't have to keep seeing that stop. Okay, so see now that put request was able to find 102, update the name to first name spider, last name man, and make me a superhero in Marvel movie department. And I have an admin role, so because Spider-Man needs an admin role. All right, so that's a put request. Again, simple. The line of code is a little bit more because we have to create this data, but it's still roughly 50 lines of code. And then if you take out the data, which is probably another 10, it's only like 30 lines of code to do this. So, but similar fashion. So it follows a very similar flow. And so it's simple to do and can be used. So let's go to the next one. So the next one indeed does not work. So let's, as far as the API is concerned, because there's a bug that I had to have time to get into, but it will still allow us to make the request to it, and then we can see what happens, what happens from the API itself.
Can you rejoin again, Mark?
Oh, am I getting staticky again?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So let's take a pause. You can ask Zach any questions while I'm away. Please do.
Blanks, is that right? Is it blanks or Biancs? I think it's blanks. We have the recordings up on YouTube. Let me grab the channel actually. I think it's CodeStack SJ, but let me find it real quick.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much.
There we go. There's a playlist and everything of it.
This was my first meeting with you guys. It's nice to meet you guys, and thank you very much.
Hey, DA. Is that how you prefer to be referred to, DA?
Yep.
Sweet. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah. This is exciting. I'm ramping back up after having been out of the industry for a little bit, and it's just such a welcoming community. It's really exciting.
Oh, that's wonderful. Which part of the industry were you in?
I was a Drupal developer
Oh.
in Lodi, and I still could be, but I think I'm gonna just go for just regular vanilla everything. I'm kind of over Drupal. It's great, no complaints, but I'm over it.
Drupal's PHP, right?
Yeah. It's in Symfony now, which is much better than what it was in 7.
Yeah.
So it stepped up, and it's a lot faster. But there was a lot of small custom projects that we were doing, and and now it's pretty much like large scale stuff.
Do you still like PHP, or are you trying to move away from that?
I have no problem with it. It's enjoyable, but I think I mean, as far as fun goes, I still enjoy front end stuff outside of PHP more, probably just JavaScript and the standards.
I've heard nothing but bad things about PHP. That's why I ask. I know lots of people like it. I know it's very good for getting started very quickly, and it's got a lot of like I think 80% of the websites in the world still currently use PHP. Facebook uses PHP, but they're moving away from it towards their own homebrew stuff. But I know PHP is still phenomenally popular.
Yes, there's still a lot of good careers to be had there. I think I'm going to move into Vue and just kind of build stuff front end. Now back end is can be so much simpler that I don't really have the time, you know. But it's a pretty powerful language. Lots of libraries, lots of support, lots of I mean, Symfony's awesome.
I've heard that was it PHP 7 when that came out? They took a lot of lessons from Hack and HHVM from Facebook.
Thankfully, yeah.
One thing I was kind of surprised by was apparently HHVM is optimized for constant restarts. So like it'll actually almost intentionally crash itself. But PHP with Zend, the Zend engine, they sped it up a lot so that it's on par with HHVM, but it's not nearly as memory hungry as HHVM is.
Okay. That's a concern, definitely.
Yeah.
Who's speaking right now, if I may ask?
DA and who else?
Zach. So hey, DA, just because I'm curious, what made you decide to pick Vue as your front-end framework?
I was looking at what it took to finish things in React and where Vue's going, and it just seems cleaner. I hate to say that. It sounds pretty ignorant, but I mean, there's still more than one way to do everything, right? Whether it's React or Angular or whatnot, but maybe it's just a little more sexy. I don't know.
I've heard that.
Yeah,
I
like a challenge, and I built my portfolio site in Vue, and I was very impressed. Very impressed.
Yeah. Vue is definitely growing in popularity, and they're going to implement a TypeScript library, and so it is growing. It's definitely a growing one.
The 3 just came out, and the support and info for it. I mean, I don't see it going anywhere but up right now.
Cool.
I was very disappointed when they moved away from using classes. That was because I firmly believe in that classes are the way forward for writing components and stuff. So I
Yeah.
was very disappointed on that. But I've heard that Vue is like really, really popular with PHP developers. I think partially because you can just drop the script tag there and you can just start coding. And it's very easy to write like inline components inside of your PHP files so that you're rendering your code along. You guys, your front end code right there with your server side code.
Yeah, when I started
Yeah, that's pretty
PHP
cool.
in 2008, just dropping a snippet in, change the file type, and yeah, drop a little tag in, and so far it's been just as easier to learn than PHP, definitely. But I've been out of JavaScript for probably 5 years, and so I've still got that curve to get over, and I'm probably halfway there.
Were you using jQuery or AngularJS before?
jQuery for the most part, yeah, because it was Drupal, and so it was easier just to call some standard stuff and not write anything because we were trying to pump things out for clients quickly.
Right. Mark, you ready to get going again? Sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah.
If you had something else to say.
All right, guys. Sorry about the audio technical issues. It seems to happen with Zoom a lot, so I'm not sure what that what that is. I'm on a headset, so maybe my headset's just not very good. I don't know. One of the things. So the next thing I want to cover is post. So posting data. So this would be adding a new something. So in this one particular one, I'm going to be adding, excuse me, adding a new event. But like I said, the event will actually not add because there's an issue in my API that I haven't had yet time to look into. So let's take a look at the code itself. So just like a put document or put request, we need to pass some data with it because it needs to know what to put in there. And so we have this event object with its title and other properties. And so we create that. We have to do our request document. It's easy enough as doing method post. And then header again, so we know what type of data we're sending. And then JSON.stringify again, so that it's the correct data format for this request. As I said, JS Fetch is very easy to use. And contacting API is relatively easy because it fits a similar pattern. So again, you just fetch what you want to fetch. So this is going to be API events, but it's going to be a post request. So I'm going to be posting some data to it with my request document. Response, log response to JSON, do some code after that, which is display. Just a note that if you're writing your own program, you could actually abstract this into a function in itself. So we wouldn't have to keep writing this over and over again because it's all similar. And then we could just pass in the URL and pass in the request document and let it do its thing. So let's save this and we can run this real quick. So let's see, I'm gonna do that, run my post. Oh, let me refresh I don't have auto refresh, so let's run my post. So you see that it calls the event, calls this URL events, and you see it hits my API. And you can see that it actually gets the data too. So here's our new event right here. I'm just gonna hit continue and it's gonna come back. And so let's see what status. So here's another status that we haven't seen, but 201 created. So it's successful, but created. I know for a fact that it's actually not creating, but, oh wait, maybe it's working now because it sent back the right data. Oh no, here we go. And it sends back an empty object because that's how I have it coded right now for this demo. And you can see what we sent over right here. And you can see that it displays that empty object here. So simple enough, that's a post request. We just create, what we want to send in it. It has to match the right structure of your object or structure of your data that you want to create on the server side that the server requests or requires. And then just make sure the method's post, content type is correct, right here, and then data, and then send it off like the other ones, and then do whatever you want when it comes back with that promise. Okay, and so the last one we'll do is a delete. Delete is a very simple one, much like the get. So we just have our request document. Our method is delete, easy enough. We do our fetch again. There's that fetch, JS Fetch API. And then it uses our web address, which is API users, and then I pass in a 2, but I don't have a 2, so let's go out and get the right user ID I want to get rid of. This person is not here anymore, so let me take 103. And 103 is a query param, or a parameter, that of the user ID I want to delete, just like we did with the put up here. So if we go back to put, we passed in the user ID that we want to delete. Put or update, this is a delete. Same concept, even same structure, just the only thing different is the fact that we don't pass data in because they don't save data, and we have a delete method. And then this is all boilerplate, same. We save that. And so right now, this is the users we have. So if I go ahead and run this delete, oh, refresh. And so let's get the users again, just to see and make sure we have what users we have. Okay, we have these 3 users. And if I run the delete, it hits my delete endpoint or access point for the API. And you can see that it gets that ID. And it runs all of this code. This is all C# code, so it may look a little bit like JavaScript, but it's not. And we're just going to continue to let it do its thing. Oops. Go back. And let's see what our status is. Okay, so delete is getting us a 200 OK, so that means it works. And then our preview is user delete successfully. So this one is returning the response is returning us something different in the body. It's returning us just text. And so we don't have that data, it's just text. And so, and actually it's not displaying either. And that's our response data. Okay, so let's see if that worked out. Okay, see, and there goes our data is deleted. So essentially it's a simple way of adding extra functionality to your site. So if you want some kind of like, say maybe you want like a check-in on your site for whatever reason, and you want to be able to save those names, there could be an API out there that's built already that you can link into with Fetch that allows you to save those people that are checking in. Or if you think in an example, when you log into or get to a new site that requires a username and password or some kind of account, but then it gives you an option of doing Google. That in itself is probably ran by an API. It's a more complex API that allows you to do login and authentication, but nonetheless, it's the same concept. So I would suggest use this simple version once I post the code for you guys to dive into APIs on a simple level. And before I go, so I want to take some of my addresses that I wanted to share with you guys. So let me pull it up. So one moment. So while I'm trying to pull up the addresses I wanted to share, I want to ask if there's any questions or comments or anything like that. So. So I want to show you guys some stuff real quick before we call this a night, or call this presentation over. The night's not over, but. So this is going to be in the PowerPoint that I shared, but this is the list or the site that allows you to get some free APIs. And once it loads, I guess my internet's a little slow today. which is strange. This one's particularly telling you the top 27 best free APIs, but it might load, guys. It really will. I promise you. There you go. It's doing something there. Yeah. No wonder my audio is not doing very good. I think something's going on with my internet.
If you've got Comcast, I've had the same kind of situation today, and if it lowers the frame rate, it will mess with audio.
Yeah, so I do have Comcast. That's actually, then it's probably the same thing you had to deal with today too. So you can see this is just the top 27. The site, Rapid API, has hundreds of APIs to choose from. I haven't even had a chance to go through the ones that I wanted to try out. But for instance, if you guys ever play Hearthstone, there's a API that provides up-to-date Hearthstone data pools. Let's see what we get from there. We can get a get, and you see there that it shows us like it's the same thing. So get calls. You can do a fetch get call for info, current patch, classes, something like that. Get single card. You can get a name and ID for a single card. What other else? Urban Dictionary. Here's another well-known website. Like maybe you want to get a definition for something. You can get define. I don't know if that's actually a definition. So what else? There's Open Weather API. And I know our CodeStack students use this one to do some of their earlier projects when they start diving in the APIs. But this allows you to get current weather information. Oh my gosh, okay. So I'm gonna close that, but it allows you to get current weather information on specific cities and locations. The other thing I want to show is, I need to change this link name, but this page. Okay, so this is a list of all the different methods. And so let me just get rid of this developer tool real quick. You can see there's other ones besides, you see get here, that's one we covered, post here, we covered that, we covered put, we covered delete, but there's all these other things we can do. We can do options, which my work with option is it's kind of like a test request that is sent to an API to make sure things are up and running. It does some other stuff too. There's trace, connect, and actually, you know what? It doesn't have patch on this list. So there's another one called patch, but that's a complicated update that updates specific values. And then the last thing I wanted to show is this list. And then here's all our status codes. So you can see like 100, so the 100s are all informational. We have 100 continue all the way to, oh no, 100 is very low. 100, 101 switch protocol. We have success ones. We have 200, which is okay, which I covered. But you can also have 204, which is okay, but no content is returned. If we go over to server errors, you could have, a 502 bad gateway, 503 service unavailable, which would mean like maybe you're able to hit the API, but the particular service you're getting is currently down. Gateway timed out, a lot of different status codes. So this is another thing you guys can review. So I appreciate your time with me. I'm sorry for the audio issues that we were having that kind of broke up the presentation. I hope that you guys can find time to really practice using Fetch and use some of these APIs to provide more functionality to your front-end sites. And even if your Fetch is great because it's so easy and lightweight, that even if you're just focusing on a front-end aspect of your sites, you could still have some back-end functionality with very little work. And that's the glory of APIs, is that, you know, somebody else does that functionality for you. You just have to call it and get the data, or get or save or update the data. So I'm going to stop here and say any questions, comments, concerns, or ideas. And I'm going to stop sharing too. So let's stop sharing. All right. So so this last 40 minutes is open for any other questions. Not even it doesn't have to pertain to JS Fetch, but Zach and I are here to answer any questions you guys might have, and it could be related to a career as a software developer or as a web developer, career challenges. It could be really anything that's in the realm of being a developer or a full stack or software developer, or even front-end developer. Designer, I can't really answer because right now I'm not the designer on the phone. That's not my primary role, but we might be able to answer some of the questions you have. So.
Keep in mind, there's no silly questions, really. If you think that you're going to ask something and it's like, oh, everybody knows this, trust me, there's almost literally nothing in programming that everybody knows.
Yeah, so absolutely. And this is that time that we want to provide on these meetups, that you guys can answer some question that you can't find anywhere else. Like, get some real world perspective, get day to day, because often, especially with actually now, as software development is being has this glorification in media that we're like some hidden magic that nobody can replicate and just is unforeseen. So please do ask those questions that you might be curious about. There's no stupid questions.
There are only the potentially stupid answers we're going to give you.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, DA.
As far as a career goes, I'm actively looking right now, and I guess I'm in the place where I'm kind of sloughing off the imposter syndrome. I've got the design experience, but they're all updated stacks, JavaScript, and everything has been updated since I've been working on things. So I feel like I'm trying to get over the hill. I'm a little nervous, like, filling applications out right now, because I feel, I guess, individually, like I would only have maybe a junior developer type of ability at the moment. I could Google and answer questions, but just being able to be at production level, that's still a little intimidating right now. And I guess my question is, should I look for positions that are a little more limited, that I can just have some time and experience, or should I just study my butt off and just apply for everything?
I would say, so when you're referring to like front end stacks and things of that nature, you're referring to like advancements in the JavaScript language, correct? And like new frameworks that have come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel? How do you feel about your old skill, like your skills with like ES5, the pre-ES6 standard of JavaScript?
Probably 70%, and I'm probably 40 with ES6 within the last month. So another couple weeks, and
yeah. So like honestly, like the new stuff that they put, there is a lot of stuff that they added from 2015 onward. You're right. They I think if I remember correctly, they more than tripled the size of the spec since 2015, since that was ratified. So yeah, you're right. There is a lot that's been added. But if you feel like you're comfortable with ES5, like if you understand how the prototype chain works, if you can look at like the old style of creating classes where it's like you have the function with the uppercase name and you do like function foo and then foo.prototype dots method name equals another function. Like if you can understand that, it's not going to be exceptionally difficult for you to take the next step and to learn a lot of the things that ES6 adds and stuff, because a lot of the stuff that's been added is mainly for ergonomics. It's for making your life easier as a developer.
Okay.
That's why we have things like template strings and constant let and whatnot.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I do love those changes.
Yeah, I love ES6. It's awesome.
Yeah, my goodness. It made it a lot more, a lot more realistic, like I was used to PHP.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
But thank you for
So,
that.
so yeah, if I may add, so first of all, you should, if you're willing to apply, so if you're willing to try to interview, you should always apply. And here's why. Because even if it's a job that once you get in that interview, it's over your head, you're going to learn something from that interview. You're going to learn how they interview for that level. And then you can take that back and say, okay, this is where I have to be when I do interview again for that type of level. Right.
Sure.
And if you're way underqualified, they probably won't bring you in for an interview, but it doesn't hurt to try.
Right.
My suggestion would be to try to judge your own skill set and say, okay, I think I can do this. And if it's, I think I can do this, try apply. And if that doesn't work, then, step down a level to another like entry level or something, try apply for that, and just keep trying. Cause that's one thing I learned is, and I'll give you kind of a semi-personal, not too personal,
Sure.
history of my career is that I used to work for Hewlett Packard. And they went through a big splitting of the company. And when the new company was formed, they decided that they wanted to do some workforce reduction. And I unfortunately was part of that. And during that period, I found that, I had the imposter syndrome because I just got laid off. So, and the second of all is that, that confidence is low, right? But what I did learn is that every interview I went through, and even to this day, those interviews, I have information in the back of my head that helps me get through interviews, helps me feel more comfortable, helps me work in my daily life too, like things that, just how other companies, and it also gave kind of some insight into some of these other companies, like what their values are and how they work.
Sure. I made it to round 3 with a position at UC Davis last month, and then they closed down hiring. And
oh no,
it was really a beneficial thing, just from the fact that there was a goal to shoot for, right? So it was like, get your ducks in a row, get up and start running. But then I made it through. Making it through the first couple of them gave me a big head of steam, to keep going. But I didn't get the coding interview. So that part, I have a mentor that works at UC Davis, which is really helpful. Like, he can refactor with me and help me with that. But I mean, you can't have somebody do your job, so
yeah.
that's where
So
I needed to hear from somebody else, like, just go ahead and do it. Throw your pennies in the fountain, everywhere you can, and just learn.
yeah,
Definitely.
and so let me give you another little. So that coding interview portion is the toughest part, and it's going to happen in a lot of the interviews because it's just kind of this industry standard. Unless you're like design is less. If you're getting to like a design oriented job, it's a little less technical, and then some smaller companies won't do those technical interviews. So first of all, don't feel bad if it doesn't work out because of that technical interview. Those things are hard. They're meant to be challenging. And there's a whole way of studying and preparing yourself for that. So that's my suggestion is don't shy away from the interview. Just expect a technical prepare and look up resources to practice these. And there's things like Code Fight and Code Wars, and I have a couple other ones that allow you to do some of these practice questions.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Awesome.
Yeah, and one other thing is like not every place is going to do a technical interview. In fact, there's a lot of places that are coming out and saying that we don't believe in technical interviews because it's not really representative of what you do in a day-to-day job. So you might get something where they say, "Hey, why don't you do this take-home project, or why don't you just show us some live coding where you're just demonstrating how you would apply your method to a given problem," and you don't even necessarily.
So more of why you're doing what you're doing instead of exactly
and the other part of that is that whether or not you get hired as a developer can often have nothing to do with your skills. You could be an absolute rock star 10 times developer, and you might get turned down because of culture fit, for instance, or because the way you approach things, just they don't think that it would jive well with the team or anything like that. And you talk to 100 different people, 100 different interviewers, you get 100 different responses at what makes a good candidate, what they look for in a candidate. Sometimes it's just the people that you're talking to just don't like you, and that can be for whatever reason.
And actually, Zach, you made me think of something. A little example for you. So when I was going to, because I got actually, I probably shouldn't say this. So in the past, I had actually got asked to the interview for Google, and I didn't think it was going to go very well. So and it didn't, obviously, because I'm here. I'm not at Google. But the moral to the story is that I had done research on how they interview and all this stuff, and I came across the article, and I forget what software it is, but it's a really well-used software, and Google actually uses it. And the developer of that software went into a Google interview and did not get a job.
Oh, homebrew.
So, homebrew, yes, that's what it is.
He was asked to implement a binary, I think it was a binary search tree.
Binary tree, binary search tree, that's what it was.
I remember that.
And he didn't get a job.
Let's say it was probably soft skills then, huh?
Well, no, in his case.
See, that's my point is that was Zach's point, is that Zach had mentioned that, they may just not like you for whatever reason. So it can be very suggestive, and you should just keep going for them, keep trying. I mean, by all means study, because it'll make it easier for you, make you more confident at the very least. And then also, and I don't make this book, so it's not a shameless plug, but I had picked up Cracking the Coding Interview. I'm not done with it yet. I'm kind of in the beginning of it, to be honest. It's a big book. It's like a dictionary. Pick that up because it has a lot of tips in there. If you run into these technical. Cracking, I can type it. Maybe I could just share a link.
I've already got it written down. No worries.
Okay, so Cracking.
Well, if you want to share the link anyway for everyone else, Mark.
Yeah, so I'm going to share this link, but if you're going to be getting into a developer role that's not design oriented, so if it's even front end will have this, and you're going to end up facing these technical interviews, pick this book up and try to get through it. And I mean, it's big and there's a lot going on, but try to get through it and try to learn it, and it'll help out a lot. So let me look it up and I'll post that. I think that's a great question.
And I'll tell you, DA, no matter how skilled you might feel you are, it's always possible to flub an interview. Don't beat yourself up about it. As an example, not to toot my own horn too much, but I feel pretty confident in my skills as a JavaScript developer. A while back, not too far ago, I think it was the end of last year, I applied to work at a JavaScript company just for fun. It was actually run by the person who wrote the WebSocket specification. So I was in the first round pre-screening where I was talking to a non-technical person. And by the end of the interview, they were like, so I don't think you really know JavaScript all that well. I'd encourage you to go out and yeah.
That's weird to hear.
So I completely bombed
that.
Yeah, I completely bombed that interview. So don't feel bad if you go into that. It happens to literally everyone.
Okay. Well,
yeah. I mean, there's nerves involved too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If I can let go of those and just go in, I mean, it's like lots of fish in the sea. You get turned down a lot, but you only need one, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, but don't throw too many rusty hooks, or you'll get a reputation with all the other fish.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not going to happen. You can still do that. That doesn't happen in job interviews. The dating analogy.
Yeah, people do tell me.
It just
and
depends.
I'm only looking.
Depends on the companies.
For sure, for sure.
Sure. I'm only looking to. I'm trying to do something remote because I've got kids that are going to be learning at home. So that's gonna narrow the search. But there's nothing wrong with even getting an offer and having to say no. At least I'm gonna get better at interviewing.
Yeah, and even if you say no, like that's many companies will be like, oh well, that's fine. You know, we still like you as a candidate. If things turn around, you change your mind, you can always reapply. Like getting a job offer, you shouldn't feel obligated to take it just because you got an offer. But you might know that already.
So may I ask you weren't part of CodeStack, right? You programmed before. You didn't take any like academy. Like, what's your background?
With CodeStack, I am not. I haven't been associated for long that I know. I need to go back and look. My history was I actually learned from getting a job. Somebody said like, "Hey, you're kind of technical. Do you want to learn to code?" And so I actually taught myself and had a friend help and moved along. And so it was PHP, HTML, CSS, like everything kind of all at once. But 3 years later, 2011, and my boss couldn't keep clients. It was an interesting little shop in Lodi. It was a little tricky for them to keep clients. So when you don't have work, you can't work. So I went back to
downtown Lodi.
Huh?
Can you rejoin, Mark? Your mic's staticky again.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in Lodi. The shop was in Lodi. There's no developers there now. I think they just do hosting. But it was with iSelect, and it was a great job. Lots of good experience, and I've been doing freelance stuff since, and so that's kind of where I'm at. A good friend of mine had actually told me about some meetups in Stockton, and I don't know if it was CodeStack or if I just found CodeStack on Meetup when I was looking at.
There was another group who
was doing Valley something.
Valleyworks, yeah. I've been to some of their stuff. They're good people. They're in and around the industry.
What's his name? The gentleman that's leading some of the Zoom meetings right now works for
Nate Bunny. Nate Bunny? Oh no, not Nate Bunny. Nate Bunny's the Valleyworks person, but
he's the
I know who you're talking
guy.
about. I know who you're talking about. I've met him. Yeah, I've met him. He's a good person.
Great people. Yeah, I mean, I had the same experiences I'm having now. I'm much newer to you guys, so this is my first thing with you guys.
Yeah, they offer opportunities too for if you want to improve your presentation skills. I've given a presentation there at Valleyworks. So if you wanted to take an opportunity, I think he dropped out for a second there.
Oh yeah, maybe he had some issues too. Yeah.
I'll repeat this again when he comes back, but Elizabeth pointed out in the chat, I don't know if anyone else saw it, but she said that she's come across interviews where they ask for code snippets and they ask you to walk through code snippets with them and to explain their reasoning. So that's another form of interview there where they're like, okay, can you show us some work that you've already done?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had that one. I had the take home one. And some don't even do technical at all. Like they just have questions. A lot of governments don't.
Oh, there's DA back.
Sorry guys, my computer.
Oh, he has a picture now too.
Oh, wonderful. Putting a face to the name.
Switching to guns. So
Yeah,
anyways,
yeah. Well, welcome
so
aboard.
thank you very much.
Hope to see you a little more often. So I'm gonna just present a question to the group, and this is something that comes up in our planning meetings. So we're trying to think like as far as content. For instance, I went through JavaScript Fetch, and I tried to keep it very beginner level, very easy, very understandable, very just beginner level, basic. But would you guys want to hear any more advanced topics, or how do you guys feel? Do you guys feel comfortable with more advanced topics, or do you want to stick with the beginner level, the basic level topics? Maybe I can get somebody from the group to chime in, and you could chime in the chat and let me know how was like this level, or the Git presentation if you were there, or.
One of the reasons that we're asking this is we're trying to figure out where the community is at as far as what they would like to see. Obviously, everyone who shows up there, obviously, you all are obviously interested in learning about the Fetch API and things of that nature. But we've, in the past, when we've done stuff like HTML and CSS stuff, we've actually received a lot higher turnout. And so what we're trying to figure out is, with this level of stuff, is it where it's like a little, I don't know if this is the correct term, but too advanced, or is it like too many steps beyond like someone who's starting to get into the industry? I know DA, you mentioned you were a Drupal developer before. I know Elizabeth's been through CodeStack, and she's actually worked with us before. So I know you two at least are familiar with this stuff, but any of the other people in chat, if you have any opinions about like, I'd like to see something a little bit more along this lines where it's like, something is kind of more of a stepping stone, if that makes sense, to more advanced knowledge, or if you think that we're at the right level, or maybe even not high enough a level that you would like to see more advanced stuff. That's kind of what we're trying to figure out. It's kind of like a little survey.
Yeah, and even if you want to take the whole level aspect out of it, is there anything that you have been curious about that oh look, Omar shared HTML, CSS, responsive design, programming design. So he wants responsiveness. So if there's anything that you're like, oh, I really wish they would talk about this, please provide it in the chat, and like I'll take note and we'll have somebody do it. And we're not trying to avoid any programming topic necessarily.
We want to be where our audience is at. We want to be where you all are at as far as delivering material that will be of maximum benefit to you all. Do we have someone I'm trying to remember, do we have Semantic HTML on the docket?
We do not.
We do not? That might be a good topic to put on.
That wouldn't even be bad for some advanced people, to tell you the truth. Even
Yeah.
Some good foundation.
No, that's a good one. We had mentioned it in our meeting at one point. I don't know who mentioned it, but yeah, we'll see if we can get somebody to do that.
I'd be very interested in doing that, because I'm very, very into accessibility with HTML.
Okay,
and
cool.
Semantic HTML does a lot for you with regards to helping you out with making things more accessible.
Yeah, so yeah, put that on your list of to-dos, and we can next one up, maybe you can cover that. So is there anything else that anybody would like to cover? We like this open dialogue. It kind of makes Meetup feel less less virtual, because right now we can't meet in person, so it's hard to have those conversations, and a lot of good things are brought up, like the interview question, or 2 weeks ago there was a conversation about imposter syndrome, and these are things that are like great to talk about, because often if you're new to like software industry, it's hard to really know like how people in the industry are dealing with things, or how it is the life of a programmer kind of thing. And if you are in the industry, it reaffirms, your feelings and how that your fellow developer, you're not alone, like fellow developers go through the same woes or have the same curiosities or have the same challenges or are interested in the same, same technologies. So
Yeah, and like everyone is an imposter practically at some point. You're always, until you get, there's a manga it's coming towards an end now, but it's called Haikyuu. It's kind of there's a moment in there where one of the main characters is talking with, it's about volleyball, but they're talking with someone else about how they feel about volleyball, about playing the sport. And he's like, oh, do you like volleyball? Are you invested in it? And he's a pretty good player, but he's like, no, I don't know. I don't really feel all that into it. I don't know. And he's like, oh, that must be because you haven't had that moment yet. And that moment where you just have this, where you get hooked into it, where you're like, yes, I know what I'm doing. And much later on in the series, it comes when he stuffs one of the top power hitters in the series. He completely stuffs the dude and blocks him out, and he just lets out this like real primal scream, like, yes, like I finally did it. So the character's name is Ushiwaka. So I always say that with things like that, like you're going to feel like an imposter. You're going to feel like you're not right until you have that moment where you kind of stuff Ushiwaka, where you really surmount something that you didn't think was possible for you to do. Once you get that moment, that's going to be your biggest cure for imposter syndrome, I think. But, if you feel that way, you're not alone. You're very, very far from alone.
Oh yeah, very, very far away. There's several TED Talks about it. There's, I think at the JavaScript conference, like 2 years, because I looked this up at one point after we had that conversation. At the JavaScript conference, there was a really well received quick talk about it, and it's something that I think every human being, I mean, not every human being, but a high majority of human beings face in their career. And it's even more prevalent in software development, because we have a challenging job that involves constantly learning and constantly not knowing what's going on. Not constantly, but, not knowing,
And things are changing out from underneath your feet all the time. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, they say the half-life of knowledge in programming is 6 months to 2 years. After that long, no matter how good you are, you become like half as effective, essentially, unless you're constantly training yourself and constantly updating your knowledge.
Yeah. All right, so on our schedule, we have about 12 minutes left. We can either call it nights early, or if you guys have, anything else to say, please do. I'll give it about 5 minutes to see if anybody chimes in. Maybe less than that, a few minutes. Okay, Zach, do you have any any parting words that you want to say, or anything that?
Anything you think I should touch on?
Not that I can think of.
The one thing I really want to stress, I guess, and I've said this before, I guess this is my one thing that I want to say to every developer, people who are starting out, is that if you don't know, like when you're just trying to break in, it's brutally difficult. Like there's so much stuff to know, and it's really, really hard to know where you need to get started. But this is something that worked really well for me. What I would recommend doing is just reading as much stuff as you can get your hands on. It doesn't matter if you understand it. In fact, if you don't understand it at all, it'll probably help you out better in the long run, because what you're doing then by bringing in all this wide amount of data is you're starting to pick up the terminology, you're starting to pick up kind of what kind of the culture of programming and how people communicate with each other. And that's going to be kind of your biggest way of starting to figure out where to get into things and where you want to start knowing more or digging in more and things like that, and starting to be able to digest material more, because the more you read this stuff, the more you get the terminology, the more your brain is just gonna be like, oh, I know that pattern because I've seen this 12 other times. And even if you don't remember anything from what you've read, your subconscious mind will have that data and will be able to build that pattern for you. So reading a lot of stuff and not understanding it, that's not a bad thing. In fact, that can be a very, very, very good thing. So I'd recommend just read as much as you can possibly get your hands on. And that's all that's my point. That's my closing point.
Cool. Thanks, Zach. And thanks everybody. Thanks for sticking it through and participating. Have a good night. And actually, what's on our docket for next time is, Project Euler, I think might be our next conversation. I think a little demo into what Project Euler is. I'm not sure what it is, so it's going to be new for me. And James Foley is one of our talented developers that's going to be covering that. Yeah, so look forward to seeing you guys. Have a good night. Thanks, Zach. You can close the call now.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.